Rev up your engines! Here we have a Honda Civic with a weird AC problem, and it's been doing it for years. First thing in the morning it'll blow okay, but if it sits in the sun, turn it on, it will not blow cold. He's had people look at it. Well, here's one thing I learned about AC. Don't listen to what anybody ever told you about anything. So trust no one. First, hook up gauges. Blue low side goes on low side. It says L. They only fit one way. Hook it up until it's snapped on. Hook it to the high side, which of course says H for high side. And these things are always getting lost, though. Stick them on a little tray here so we don't lose them. Hook that up, and again, you turn it to open the gauge up. Now we can see right here, this is pretty normal. This has like 95 pounds on the low and 95 pounds on the high. Now, on the surface, that looks good. Of course, we don't know what the heck is inside there. Propane, we don't know, but the pressures are right, so let's turn it on and see what happens. It's running. Both cooling fans are spinning. The pressures aren't bad. 39, 160. You saw how the low got too low. There's only two things that can do that. One is, the stupid thing doesn't have the right amount of refrigerant, which we have no idea. So I'm going to evacuate it out, then put in the right amount by weight and hope it fixes it. Because if that doesn't fix it, that means that somewhere in the system there's a restriction. And the restriction makes the low side go low because the low side is sucking. And if it works right, the pressure should stay at 30, 35 PSI. But if it's restricted, it can actually suck it into a vacuum. This went down to about 10 PSI. Now, if you're low on refrigerant, it'll do the same exact thing. So let's try that first. All right, so now I'm evacuating with an evacuation machine. You're not supposed to do this yourself because you don't have an evacuation machine. But I'm going to evacuate it for two main reasons. One, we don't know what the heck is in it. And two, it might have a bunch of air in it. You know what happens when air gets in your system? It goes bonkers and it can do exactly what it's doing. Some fool could have worked on it. This will tell us whether it's an internal problem or it was just low on refrigerant. It's the only way you can do it without pure guesswork. You got to make sure it has the right amount, that it's vacuumed with nothing in it, and then fill it up by volume. Now it's evacuated out, you get everything out of the system. You got to figure out how much to put in. Well, that's good. It says right here. There we go, which is 15 ounces. Not even a pound. You can't be off anything on these or they won't work right. Now, normally we check for leaks, but this thing hasn't been touched in over a year, and it was still a lot of refrigerant in it, so it's not leaking. If it was leaking, pressure gauges, but you can see it's staying way down the end of the green. So we know it's not leaking. Now, as you can see, I'm using a reverse scale. This screws on here. You want to get the air out of the system. So you open it up, and you get your gauges. Makes a little hiss. There. You have to make sure there's no air in the line. Air will ruin things. Now, that's all set up. We'll turn this on. You can see it's at 0 now. We have the high side closed. Now the low side, we want to add, so we open it up. There it goes. So we'll go inside, turn it on with the AC on full blast, and we'll just run this until it's a 0.425, then it's full. Now we have the truth. It's running, it's full of refrigerant, but the low side has gone into vacuum. Now, he thought it was odd that when it got hot, it wouldn't blow cool, but in the morning it would blow cool. Here's the sticker. This is an old style system. They have what are called expansion valves. They open and close. Sometimes as they age and they heat, they shut up. When they shut up, right here, we got negative pressure. We have vacuum because it is so restricted, it's not opening at all, so all the compressor can do is suck at nothing. And it goes into vacuum. Now, before we noticed it was 30, 35, and we revved up the engine, it went down to 10 or 15. That meant that it was partially restricted then. But now, when the hot air has been sitting here, it's completely restricted, and it's gone to vacuum. So, generally what it needs is an expansion valve. Now, this cool, hot, cool has been going on for 2.5 years on this car. And that's about the only thing that would make sense, is that the expansion valve is sticking. Well, let's look it up. There it is, expansion valve, service and removal. Tells you everything you have to take apart, which is all the dash. And it says it's 3 hours labor, not including evacuation. So, you're probably talking about a regular mechanic. It's going to be about $450 labor, plus the refrigerant, plus the valve. Now the valve's only like $65. And take my advice on this one. If you do want to change it, go to Honda, buy the OEM part. You buy some cheap-made Chinese piece of crap, you do all that work and find out it doesn't work, you're going to be screaming. And while you're at it, since you open the system, you really need to change your dryer filter. So at least now we know the truth. The guy at the Firestone store didn't rip him off. He said that he evacuated and filled it up, and it was completely full. Wasn't any different. It's just that the expansion valve is sticking, then it goes into a vacuum, and then tomorrow morning when it's cold, it opens itself back up again, and then it works until it gets hot, and then it sticks again. And really, you just need to replace it. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, places like AutoZone, O'Reilly, they will rent you the gauges, won't cost you anything. They even rent you a vacuum pump. Don't want to buy all this real specialized equipment like me. There is a trick. This thing only holds 15 ounces. You can actually buy cans for like 25, 30 bucks that have pretty close to 15 ounces in a gauge on them. And you could just put the can in, or let's say it's got 16 ounces. You could put most of the can on, watch the pressures, and if it blows cold, leave it at that. At least you would know, once you evacuated, what you have in is pretty close to 15 ounces. We just know that the expansion valve is stuck on this, and then you decide, okay, you want to pay a mechanic $500, $600, $700 to replace it? You want to try it yourself and spend 65 bucks on the part? Or you just want to roll the windows down? At least now you know exactly what you're dealing with, and there's no baloney involved. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Zabada Bang says, how bad has Carvana screwed me? I'm thinking badly. Recently, I purchased 2014 Scion XB 71 days ago with 55,000 miles. I paid 15 grand for the car and 2 grand for the warranty. But I don't have the registration. They say that some third party has the title. They don't know when it's going to come. I can't rideshare with Uber forever until I get registration. It's been 71 days. Now I regret the whole experience. Do you think a company with as much business as Carvana should get putting pressure on whoever's causing the delay? Well, yeah, of course. Here's the problem is, you're dealing with a company like Carvana. Their stock went from like 20 bucks to like $200-300. It's just insane. All they do is buy and sell cars. They don't know the history of anything. And obviously here they bought a car, they don't even have the title for the thing. And they say, oh, it's stuck with a third party thing, right? They buy and sell so many cars, they have no idea what's going on. It's a giant corporation, so they're like, their heads are cut off at the top. They don't know what's going on. And the people that work there are just, worker bees. They don't care. No one cares in one of those corporations. They're so huge. You don't buy from these giant companies. They don't care about you. They don't know the history of the cars. They buy and sell so many cars. They have no idea whether the cars have been wrecked or not. They look at crap like, oh, Carfax says it was never wrecked. That doesn't mean squat these days. Even you read the Carfax thing on one of the pages, it says, this car has not been in a wreck as far as all the information Carfax has been able to glean, So even there they're giving an if, like, well, maybe it wasn't a wreck and we didn't know about it. All nonsense. The more corporate stuff gets involved, the more nonsense gets in. And now you're stuck in the middle of it. You paid too much for a car that you can't even drive around because you can't get the title for the stupid thing. It's just typical. It's totally typical with these giant corporations. When there's a problem with them, you're not going to get satisfaction. The only way to get even with giant corporations is don't buy their products. That's the only way, and you already bought it, so unfortunately you're screwed and you're going to have to deal with that nonsense. Just my advice, don't do it again. Architect 930 says, Scotty, I got an 04 Tacoma, 175,000 miles. I've gone through 3 sets of rotors from auto parts stores, include the latest, the slotted and drilled. I seem to get vibration and warping. Is it time for new calipers? I don't know what you're buying. That's a Tacoma, it's a truck, it's got a reasonable amount of heft. A lot of times these aftermarket rotors are garbage for trucks. If I were you don't have to buy them from the Toyota deal, but I would buy factory OEM rotors next time and see what happens. Because I've seen people buy these aftermarket ones and they keep wearing out. And you said you got slotted and drilled. Big mistake with the truck. The slotted and drilled ones are for racing. Since they're slotted and drilled, there's what? Less surface area. So guess what happens? The things will warp and wear out faster because there's less metal for the pads to squeeze. Don't ever do that if you want long life. You just want regular plain OEM rotors. Because I've found the same thing. I've had people give me rotors that I tested out that were made, say, in China, and they warp. Sometimes 20,000 miles, they warp. Then I buy the OEM ones, and they go 100,000 miles and don't have any problems. So it's probably the rotors you're buying. Now, let's say, drive down the road hard, then stop, jack it up, spin the wheels. If they spin freely, there's nothing wrong with the system. If they drag a bunch, yeah, then you might need calipers or your brake master cylinder maybe sticking and not releasing. If that's the case, what you do is drive it. If they're sticking when you pull on them quick, open the bleeder valves. If you open the bleeder valve and then they release, that's not the caliper, that's the master cylinder keeping pressure in. If you release the bleeder valve and they still stick, that means the caliper's sticking. That's a real easy way to test it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.